Prime Minister, obviously you are here today. We do want to get to the COVID case, but I want to acknowledge where we are today. What's been like for you having a look around at this initiative?
Fantastic to visit the team who are part of this incredible project, which just demonstrates what is possible when we're working collectively together, dealing with food insecurity, but also making sure that we are reducing waste. These are projects that are demonstrating that actually we can use much more of what we're taking from the sea and use that to feed our communities. And so fantastic to see in action.
I do want to move on to the COVID case now. Wondering, what's the latest you have, and can we rule out this border worker catching it from someone travelling from Australia?
Yes, all of the signs here pointing very much to the fact that this was a border worker who did work in an environment where they were coming into contact with the planes that are used to transport people from red zones, so from high-risk countries. So this is an individual who boards planes to clean them after they've come from places where there is COVID, carrying passengers with COVID. So a very clear link at this stage to cases that are high risk.
Why was this person not vaccinated? What's going wrong here?
Well, I can confirm that this was someone who was vaccinated and fully vaccinated quite early on in the campaign. This is also someone who is part of routine testing, so they were last tested on the 12th and then the 19th, so regular testing, and it was their most recent test in which this case has been picked up. So you can see those protocols there working as we would intend.
Have you spoken to the Australian Prime Minister about this, given the Trans-Tasman bubble has just opened?
Oh, look, and look, when we opened on both sides, we of course knew that we would continue to have cases connected to our border. In fact, when we announced the date for opening the Trans-Tasman bubble, Queensland was dealing with cases linked to its border. So we accept that's going to be part of our journey together. I think Australia accepts that. And for both sides, we're always looking for clear connection to the border, and in this case there is.
So have you spoken to Scott Morrison?
No, I haven't, but our Minister of Health has kept in touch with his counterparts. So they're directly communicating, and so are our officials. Everyone, therefore, knows the case we have and that it's connected to the border. And these are the kinds of scenarios where we would anticipate movement continuing.
And in terms of contact tracing, how is that progressing?
So obviously we've just, the cases we've just been informed about today, usual protocols kicking in. So all of the contact tracing is underway and of course making sure we're isolating close contacts. What's really important here though is we know that this is someone who was tested only recently. They were negative on the 12th, and then their more recent test was positive, so we've picked them up in that routine screening, which is always helpful.
You mentioned that they were working on flights from the red zone. We've obviously got the ban on flights from India. Will this mean that other zones are potentially banned as well?
I mean, look, the reason this person was part of our surveillance testing was because they were working in an area that we consider to be high risk. They are coming in contact with the planes that are carrying passengers from high risk countries, and so that is a place where our workers they are in the kinds of roles that means they need to be tested, they need to be vaccinated, but they also need to be thanked for the job that they do because of the risks that it carries.
And look, just finally on the ban on Indian flights, how is that going? Are there any sort of plans for the future on that?
Oh, we will be making announcements as we get closer to the date where we said that we were taking that temporary suspension too. But as we've said before, we're considering a range of options to try and reduce down that risk because ultimately we want to reduce risk for travellers, but also we want to reduce risk at the border.
Prime Minister, we've just had some information come through. The Auditor General has ruled that the payment for Ihu Mātau land was unlawful. What do you know about this, and was this?
Look, we've been confident on our side that we were using funding that was from land for housing, and that is exactly, ultimately, what all parties have determined we are working towards. The use of Ihu Mātau through agreement for that group for particular parts of the land to be able to be used for housing. So that is very much the perspective we've taken on its use.
Was this a botch up by your government?
No. We were very clear that this was land, once we reached that agreement, that will be utilised for housing. What we fully expect, though, is that we've got quite a large process to go through between all parties to to determine how that will be undertaken.
Was it right to create new rules to use this money to purchase ihu mātau?
Well, I would reject that we've done that. Of course, it was funding that was intended to purchase land for housing. That has been our intent. The difference here being, of course, that there's a lot of work to go through between all parties to determine where on the land, how it can be most appropriately done, and how it can be used for housing for the community.
So just again, you were confident that your government's payment was lawful when coming to ihu mātau?
Look, what I'm sharing here is the perspective that we've taken as the government. That funding was land for housing. That is our intent, although we've always fully acknowledged there's quite a bit of work to do between all parties involved to determine how and where that housing should be built for community.
Cool. And just going back to, I guess, the worker, they were tested, they were vaccinated, everything was right, yet they still got the virus. How much does this worry you, and how much confidence do you have in our system actually working?
This is a really important opportunity, I think, again, to just point out that the vaccine is 95% effective at reducing symptomatic onset of COVID-19. So that means it is still possible to get COVID, but it won't make you nearly as sick or likely to experience potentially some of the disastrous consequences we've seen overseas. So in this case, it is working as intended. This is not a worker who is very unwell and yet they have COVID, so it's doing its job. It doesn't mean people won't get it.
Did she or did the worker only just get their second jab, or was it done quite a while ago?
No, they were actually vaccinated from what I've seen quite early on in our rollout. So from what I've been advised, essentially we would consider them fully vaccinated.
How did they test positive if they were fully vaccinated?
So it is still, in fact, we entirely expect that people who are vaccinated will still get COVID-19. It just means that they won't get sick and they won't die. You know, that's what the vaccine is for. It's to stop the pandemic becoming so dire that we see our hospitals full and people losing their lives. It means that that symptom onset is greatly reduced. Again, it's a reminder of why at the border, even though we have vaccinated workers, we still are testing them and we're still asking them to follow all of the usual protocols, because it is still possible to get COVID-19.
And does it mean there's a lower risk to the community potentially?
Yes. One of the things we're seeing in the early data is it reduces down the likelihood you pass it on to others, but importantly, it protects our workers. You know, previously if a worker had COVID-19, we couldn't guarantee that they wouldn't be hospitalised, or worse yet, that they wouldn't die. The vaccine is saving lives.
I mean, is this a bit of a concern that we have a leaky border?
Oh, no, I mean, I wouldn't characterise it as that. It is by no means a leaky border if someone who cleans a plane that has carried people with COVID becomes infected. It's a demonstration that this is a highly transmissible virus. It's the reason we test people who interact at the border with people who are travellers, or indeed with planes that they are travelling on. You know, we've seen cases before that demonstrate how tricky this virus is. It's why we have all these measures: testing, infection controls, and the vaccine.
Prime Minister, moving to immigration.
No, not yet. Obviously we have a sample that's now being genome sequenced, and that's part of the work that's still yet to be done. So of course, further contact tracing, further places of interest, which we'll be putting out as that work's undertaken. We're quite early on at this stage.
And were they cleaning flights from all different red zones, or like one particular red zone?
Yeah, so they have been cleaning red zone flights, that's what I've been advised, but I will just say we are still undertaking the case investigation. We'll still be gathering extra information and we'll be making that available.
Moving to immigration now, with the changes announced yesterday designed to help everyone who had a visa approved when the borders were closed?
No, not necessarily. What we've done is try and firstly deal with inequities. For those who already had a visa to come into New Zealand, we're opening back up for them to be able to utilise their visas if they still have a length of time left on their visa that warrants that. If someone only has a month left to run, for instance, then that's not someone who will be able to enter New Zealand.
Cool. And can you give a bit more, I guess, clarity about when the government will consider further family exemptions, because the families, I guess, really need a date to go on, whether they stay or whether they go, depending on when their families can join them or not?
So overall, what we're working towards is progressively being able to reopen our borders when it's safe to do so. And a big part of that is our vaccine rollout, which we're working on this year. That means we won't have to rely so much on these limited capacity within managed isolation. That is some months away though. In the meantime, as we're able, we'll keep looking to broaden criteria for others to come in, but at the same time we also have demand from workforce as well.
Cool. Sorry to change subject, just
last
one. Are you concerned the government's comments on Five Eyes this week is causing waves overseas, and how do you address those concerns?
Well, I think what I'd say is that that there should be no need for that offshore. We are absolutely reaffirming our commitment to that Five Eyes partnership. What we're simply articulating here is that sometimes statements we'll make collectively will appropriately be made by Five Eyes together. In other cases, it may be that it's members of Five Eyes plus others, or just as we've done in the past, New Zealand and Australia. The point we're making is Five Eyes is a security and intelligence platform. Not every issue we speak on as New Zealand is a security and intelligence issue. So it's all about making sure we're partnering or speaking with the right cohort at the right time.
A few more from me. I'll make them quick. Is there still a place for New Zealand First in New Zealand politics?
Oh, look, actually, it's up to voters to determine who, as political parties, there is a place for in New Zealand politics, rather than other politicians. Obviously, other politicians are fairly self-interested in there not being a large number of us. It's not for us to decide.
Cool. And do you think the no surprises policy is fit for purpose?
Look, by and large, I do think there's always room for us to reflect back on whether or not it's serving its purpose, which ultimately isn't always that we get information we act on. It's simply a convention that's there to make sure that we have awareness of issues when we need to.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks everyone.
Thank you, Prime Minister.
Thank you.